Today's episode of Wonderbuzz is brought to you by Doom Scroll Detox Tea. Tired of waking up, grabbing your phone, and absorbing the entire collapse of civilization before both eyes are fully open? Try Doom Scroll Detox Tea, packed with calming herbs, a hint of denial, just enough lavender to sedate your existential dread. No caffeine, no sugar, no news, no flavor. Just hot, wet nothingness. Available nowhere, but you can find things that are real at nathanlarson.com. Now on to the episode. Hello and welcome to Wonderbuzz. My name is Nate Larson and I am your host on this semi-regular adventure into art, travel, curiosity, and van life. I hope your day is going well, and I am manifesting cookies for all of you. Today I'm going to give an update on my travels, and I will finally tackle one of the topics that comes up the most about van life, and I will answer some listener questions. So let's dive right in. Before I get to my travel updates, I hope you enjoyed my chat with Tom Haushalter in the last episode. If you have not had a chance, go back and check it out. I had some great comments come in this week about the episode, and I want to thank you very much for those. I have been covering a lot of ground these last few weeks, and I finally got back into some true off-roading with Van Halen, which is always a lot of fun and never dull. If you keep up with my photographs I post around the internet, you will notice I have been spending a lot of time in longleaf pine forests in Georgia. I have fallen in love with these forests. Georgia and other southern states have been on a decades-long path of forest restoration after longleaf pine forests were decimated by overlogging and forest fires. I definitely recommend you explore them, just not when it rains. I know from previous off-roading down here and when I worked with the Land Rover driving school, we had events down here, just how slippery and sticky and gooey the red clay of Georgia gets when it rains. It becomes an entirely new substance that contains all the properties of ice and mud at the same time. Last week, I was not really paying that much attention to the weather. I had found a wonderful forest to explore. It was deep in Georgia, and I had spent a few nights there getting lost on the trails and enjoying the wildlife and editing some photos. So I was surprised when it started to pour rain the last night I was there, and it really came down for hours. And I knew exactly what that was going to mean in the morning, but I was also a little bit excited to see how the van was going to perform in these really muddy, wet conditions. In the morning, I was able to creep my way out of the forest trail, which was in really great shape and didn't really give me any challenges at all. And then I came to a wider access trail that was that very special orangey red clay color. I walked ahead a little bit just to check conditions and almost fell twice. When I got back to the van, I thought through the worst case scenarios, which is always a good thing to do when you're off-roading before you start. I looked for anchor points in case I needed to winch. I double-checked my recovery gear. And I finally decided that if things really went sideways, I could always just turn the van off and settle in until the roads dried out. I have dug myself out of Georgia clay before, and I don't do that anymore. So if I can't drive out or winch out, or get some help from some people who are passing by to get out, I'll just wait until things dry out. Now, Van Halen is a four-wheel drive vehicle, so after engaging 4x4, I eased onto the trail. I tried to keep the throttle very smooth and reduce any sudden movements of the wheel, but Van Halen's right front tire slipped into a rut and then popped out again, which was just enough of a bounce to start the van turning right. And with no traction at all, I was soon sliding the van fully sideways down the trail, like an elephant at the ice capades. I slowly corrected the steering little by little and feathered the throttle, trying not to overcorrect as the van kept sliding sideways down the trail. And finally, as it came around almost where I was going straight down the trail again, of course, I didn't get it quite right. I overcorrected a little bit, and now I'm sliding the other way down the trail, fully sideways again. I was able to bring the van around so it was going straight, and at that point, my heart rate was definitely up. It's just not a lot of fun feeling like you don't have control of something that's that big and that heavy. The rest of the trail was just like driving on black ice, but I was able to navigate it without any more major incidents. When I finally got to the trailhead, there were two trucks parked there. There was one gentleman leaning against the hood of his truck, and he had been talking to the other man sitting inside the front seat of his truck. They saw my van come out of the trail and were definitely a little bit surprised. One of them looked up and down at the van, which was covered in this red clay now, and gave me one of those kind of chin nods of, okay, I mean, if you want to. It definitely was a funny way to end that trail because you could tell they weren't expecting to see something of that size come out of that forest right then after all the rain. A few days after my red clay adventure, I found myself in much drier conditions in the Talladega National Forest on a trail known as the Skyway Motorway. Now, like the Dalton Highway or the Dempster Highway up north, calling this a motorway is definitely a misnomer. It is not a highway or a motorway at all. This is a very rugged, washed-out trail that is full of rock scrambles and ledges. In a smaller and more nimble 4x4, it would definitely be a lot of fun, and you could probably get through the entire 20-plus mile trail without too much trouble. In a fully kitted out Sprinter van, it was like threading a tank through a needle. And even though it was a tight fit for the van, it was a lot of fun to be out rock crawling and exploring that part of Talladega National Forest. It's worth mentioning, too, that the off-roading I'm talking about is an expedition-style off-roading. You're not bombing through the woods or creating new trails. You stay on established trails, and you're going at very slow speeds, and you're really trying to preserve your vehicle and get from point A to point B. And the reason I enjoy it so much is you can take yourself into new areas and see new terrain that you would have a hard time getting to if you were only relying on hiking. While it is great to have these trails open and accessible, they really only stay that way if they're used responsibly. So tread lightly principles apply, and really just trying to be a good citizen, pick up trash along the way, and leave things generally better than you found them. Now look, I don't want to do this segment. You don't want me to do this segment, but I get so many questions about toilets. So while I have been avoiding this conversation, today we are going to flush it all out in a segment called Potty Mouth. Potty Mouth. Out here on the road, when nature calls, you don't want the answer to involve running and scrambling around for a gas station bathroom that hasn't been cleaned since 2004. So, let's talk about this glamorous world of van life toilet options, because you can romanticize the sunsets, the mountain views, the open road, but eventually every van life person faces the same question: where am I going to do my business? Potty mouth. Number one, the no toilet, no problem crowd. Now, these folks treat their bodily functions like a scavenger hunt. The gas stations, rest stops, trailheads, grocery stores, anywhere with plumbing is fair game. Honestly, I feel these are the real thrill seekers. Forget cliff jumping. Try finding an open public bathroom after 9 p.m. Potty mouth. Number two, we have the bucket and bag system people. I call these the budget bidets. You can think of a orange Home Depot bucket and a trash bag. And if you're really fancy, you sprinkle some kitty litter into that recipe. It's simple, it's cheap. I mean, it's a bucket. The downside, because there really is no upside, is that you're now traveling with a bag of your own regrets in the van. Pro tip, I would double bag. You do not want punctures at 70 miles per hour. Potty mouth. Number three, cassette toilets or porta potties. This is a wide category, but basically you have a plastic throne with a little holding tank of some chemical blue juice. If you see an RV or a van with a square door on the outside, that's a good indication that they're using a cassette toilet system. It flushes, it seals, and eventually you do have to confront your actions at some kind of dump station or bring this into a public restroom and dump it into a toilet. So I guess if there is a pro, it does feel like a real toilet. I think the con is that you have to then carry that toilet around and dump it out, or in some cases, you'll see people rolling them like the worst carry-on luggage you've ever seen.
Potty Mouth.
Number 4, composting toilets. This would be the gold standard of the I live in a van and I care about the planet when I dump crowd. It separates liquids and solids, which turns out is very important. Liquids go into one tank and solids get covered in a sawdust like fancy woodland creatures. The downside, you are still carrying around a bucket of your stuff, and eventually you're going to have to make eye contact with it.
Potty Mouth.
Number 5, the high-tech options. Wrap-On is one of the brands in this category. I refer to them as Japanese space toilets or adult diaper genies. These toilets will vacuum seal each event into its own bag, like a fancy hermetically sealed Ziploc if Ziploc made products for deeply ashamed grounded astronauts. There are no smells, there's no mess, there's no chemicals. The only downside is that the bags themselves cost more than a US college education. So that's your potty mouth rundown. What I'm glad about is that the potty mouth segment can now be sealed and delivered. This segment covers dozens of questions I have received. So hopefully it's helpful for those of you out there who have had these things on your mind. And remember, it's not about where you go, it's about where you go to go. Well, I'm very glad to have that segment behind all of us. Let's move on to something a little more fun. I have some questions and comments from listeners. The first is a question: where and how do you do laundry when you are out on the road for so long? This is a really good question. You can take the standard approach of going to a laundromat and working your schedule and the route planning that you do to make sure you're close to towns. I've mentioned before that I like to be out in the wild a little bit more, so I do hand washing. I use a bag that is built to wash clothes in, and it has these little nodules inside that scrub up against the clothes as you roll the bag back and forth on the ground. I can only wash a few things at a time, so it does take a long time to wash clothes if I want to do a lot of them. And then I just hang things out to dry in the beautiful, fresh air. There are also these small, and by small, I mean tiny electric washing machines or washing tubs that you can buy. You can search on Amazon and see them. I don't have room for one in the van, but I have some friends who have them in their camper trailers, and they love them. They can do a little bit bigger loads, certainly more than I can wash by hand, and then they just go ahead and air dry things out as well. And then, of course, moving beyond vans and even camper trailers, if you get into fancy RVs, there are actual washers and dryers in a lot of those. So those are your laundry options on the road. This is a comment that came in from someone who heard the episode where I talked about church signs. Hi, Nate. I came across a church that had lawn signs of the Disney princess from Frozen, and the sign for the church said, "Let it go, he is risen." And the way this is written out, there are many O's on the let it go. So it says, "Let it go, he is risen." I just could not get over the Disney mashup with Jesus. Yes, the Disney mashup with Jesus is a little odd. I'm sitting here trying to think of the name of that Disney princess. You didn't mention it in your comment, and now it's bothering me. I could look it up because I have the internet, but it's a lot more fun just to stare into space and talk into the microphone and try to remember. Ariel? No, that's the mermaid one. Help me out, people. Say it with me. What is it? Meredith? No, it's not Meredith. Nancy? I don't think there's a Princess Nancy. Oh, it starts with an E. Emily. No, Emily. Elsa. See, I got there. Who needs Google? It is a very odd church sign. Maybe they are just trying to attract those kids early, get them in while they're young. Thank you very much for the comment. I appreciate it. Next comment Hi, Nate. I'm enjoying the podcast. Would love to hear more about your adventures into the Northwest Territories and the roads up to the Arctic Oceans. Thanks and keep it on the road. I appreciate you writing in and leaving that comment. I would love to talk more about those adventures. I am still trying to figure out what people are interested in and what they want to hear more of. So if you write in and tell me or leave comments on the different podcast platforms, that really helps me understand what you want to hear more about. And I can definitely talk about the Dempster Highway, the Dalton Highway, Inuvik, and some of the other great adventures that I had up there in the Northwest Territories. I absolutely adore Canada. And another question. Hi, Nate. Are you going to do more interviews? Yes, I am. And if you have some interview suggestions or want to recommend people to me, just send them my information and I would be happy to reach out to them. Thanks so much for the comments and questions this week. I really appreciate it. If you'd like to view my photography or buy prints, head over to nathanlarson.com. Or if you want to wade into the dopamine swamp of despair, I'm also on Instagram at Nathan Larson Photo. If you have any questions or comments for me, reach out to podcast@nathanlarson.com. And you'll also find a link in the show notes for ways to support the podcast. Every little bit helps. Keep exploring, stay curious, and I'll see you on the next episode of Wonder Buzz.